that was sacred. That was really important. That came from our tradition. But what we do on Christmas Eve had room to change, because what's equally as hard from a child's perspective is trying to replicate a sameness in a tradition that is vastly different, with different family people, different family structure, different food on the table. And so where we found some middle ground there was we always celebrate Christmas Eve with the nuclear side of our bio siblings.
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your step family from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of step family life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show. We're very excited to have you joining us today. And we're super excited to have Lauren Reitzema and Janine McKenzie, a mother and daughter power duo, joining us here for this episode. Hey, Lauren. Hey, Janine. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thank you.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah,
So Janine and Lauren live in Denver, Colorado. And let's see, Lauren, your husband's name is Josh, right?
Correct.
You have three little ones, Leah, Jace, and Nina Joe.
Nina Joe.
And Janine, we just learned that your granddaughter's name is your name backward, Nina Joe, as opposed to Janine. Love it. Love it. And you're there with your husband, Bruce, right?
In Denver.
He's not on today, but yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us.
Yes.
You know, we were introduced to this book that Lauren wrote a couple of years ago called In Their Shoes. In fact, we shared about that book back in episode 40. And we're wondering, maybe just to get started, if you could tell us a little bit about that book and about what inspired you to take that project on, Lauren.
I'd love to, Mike. Thank you. I actually tell people I stumbled upon writing In Their Shoes, truly because I never set out to be an author, to publicize a story. I didn't even know I had the capacity to do such a thing. However, I am a public speaker and I speak very passionately about the topic of family wellness and communication and skill building, and was at a conference that had to do with relationship education for the work that we do here at the Center for Relationship Education when I bumped shoulders with Ron Deal. And he had done a breakout on the dynamics of a blended family from a child's purview. And I was just fascinated because he was so eloquent. Those of you who have listened to Ron or know his work understand that he's really, really skilled at giving practical wisdom and not just theoretical frameworks. And I was in a little post-session meet and greet networking opportunity. And I went and introduced myself. I said, I was fascinated with your work. Thank you for what you're doing. You know, as someone who is trying to stop the cycle of divorce in my own family legacy, it's important to know that people are sharing a child's perspective. Yeah. And I said, have you ever had anyone who's walked through divorce as a child share their take on starting their own family as an adult? Because I'm kind of that generation of, I grew up in the early, 80s and 90s, and not very many adult children of divorce were on the scene at that time. And my counselors that I worked with when I was walking through my own divorce healing process would always say things, well, here's what to expect. Here's what your parents are going through. And my question back to them as a 16-year-old was, have your parents been divorced? And inevitably the answer was no. But they were wonderful PhD counselors, psychotherapists, all these. And I thought, well, that's not quite how I see it. I'd like to tell you my story. And I went on and just shared coffee date after coffee date with these step parents and people who entrusted their kids to me as a mentor. And they would say, well, gosh, Lauren shared something really intriguing about her perspective, and you should listen to her. And Ron himself said, you need to write a book. And I said, I don't have time to write a book. I was pregnant at the time. I had all these things going on, but I had a story in my gut. And the moment I started putting pen to paper, there was an eloquence and a metaphorical just creation that took place that was truly magical. And I feel humbled and honored to this day to have been able to publish, because from the readers globally that have reached out, it really has given voice to something that hasn't had a lot of understanding. And so I'm just thankful and hopeful that it really can be a positive resource for others.
Absolutely. Yeah. We got a hold of the book and just devoured it. It was so insightful, and then did a book report on our show. And I also attended your breakout session at one of Ron's events, and you're just so well spoken, and you really are able to connect with those pain points that children experience and open up more awareness for us adults.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for taking on that project.
You're so welcome. I'm glad it was a resource that was worth taking the risk on.
Yeah, we recommend the book to so many of the couples that we coach, and it's so helpful.
Yeah. And, Lauren, I love the way you just said that it was worth taking a risk on. One of the things that I connected with in your book is my own story. I grew up in a blended family as well. I lost my mom when I was about a year old. And so I connected with many of the different topics and the principles and those kinds of things. And I share a lot about my story here on the podcast.
You're very vulnerable.
And so I know kind of what that risk is. It's a very vulnerable thing to do. It sounds like it took a bit of courage for you to do that. Is that right?
You're right. There really was risk involved, because anytime you take your vulnerabilities and publicize them, there are other people involved in your vulnerabilities, especially with a blended family. I didn't want to dishonor my parents. I wanted to talk very kindly about the post-blend experience. I wanted to honor my step-parents, but I had to be truthful about my lived pain experience in order to get to the other side. Right. And this was 10, 15 years after I actually went through the process. So in some ways it was very emotional, because I had to re-enter that raw pain that I had healed from to get that authentic voice that I was going for, because it's not just an entertaining thing. It's real and it's relevant. And therefore it was kind of a cathartic journey to expose it all. But walking away, I was able to hold my head high, and just some of the early feedback, even from the manuscript days that I shared with my mom, were poignant enough to say that this was the right course of action. And I'm so thankful to those that believed enough in the process to give me that extra motivation to go for it.
So good. Thank you, Lauren. Yes. Janine, I want to hear a little bit from you. Tell us about your experience with Lauren sharing this story with the world.
Well, I was on a plane and she had given me the manuscript.
Yeah.
And I was in the middle seat of the plane reading the manuscript, and I was just weeping. I just was weeping at the pain that this had caused her. And she was so eloquent. There was pride, there was pain, there was all this emotion. And this woman next to me said, "Honey, are you okay?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just reading a very sad story."
Aww.
And she said, and so when I told Lauren about that, she said, I won't publish it. I won't publish it because I don't want to hurt your feelings. And I said, you know what? That anything that happened was not with malice. Right. There was no intent to hurt. I did what I knew. Right. And when I know better, I do better. And I'm so glad that you brought this to my attention. And I think this needs to be out in the world, because so many people did what I did, because they don't know any better. Yeah. They don't want to hurt their children.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody wants to love their children well. And I really don't know any parent that goes to bed at night, unless you're a psychopath, and says, I'm going to be the worst parent that I could ever be. No, they go to bed at night wanting to be the best parents, but here you are.
And some of that, and in walking through that experience of her first look, that actually sealed the deal for me to move forward, because one of the reasons kids don't share their true experience is because, including me, we don't want to hurt the people that we love. We already know that they've been through a gamut of pain, that they've done things that have been their second choice, that they haven't wanted this for their family. They don't walk down the aisle saying, I can't wait to be in court with you. And so
and let's have some kids before that,
exactly. Let's really get this all backward. That's not how it's intended, but we also know that toxic relationships need a change of course and an action that puts people in a healthier pathway. And I remember feeling like one of my jobs was to protect my parents from further pain, and therefore I couldn't express my own because I was the kid who had to hold it all together and make it easier on them. And so a lot of this was a privately experienced journey that I felt like no one can know that I'm suffering, and until my shoulders were not big enough to carry that any longer.
That's a lot of responsibility for a kid to carry.
Yeah.
That's a burden.
It sounds to me like in the midst of this, Janine's on a plane. She's interacting with strangers about this deeply personal story. And that took a lot of courage then for Janine, for you to kind of pull that together and say, no, I'm behind you, Lauren. Let's get this thing published. And it sounds like there was some affirmation in the midst of that as well for Lauren to say, hey, it's okay that there were some things that weren't perfect. And we can still move forward together as mother and daughter. Is that right?
Yes. And the voice of the book, I've read it a lot. I mean, when you author something, you read it a lot. You feel like the words change with a month. Just keep reading it to make sure it's still the same. But I really do feel like there's a lot of grace and honor and almost explanation for some of the hurt that the kids cause, which comes full circle because this is not a big diatribe against my parents. This is not look what you did. It's more of a, wow, did you know, or have you considered? It's a source of empathy, creation that I think is the furthest that you can take something. Is you might not cultivate changing the dynamic. You might not be able to reconcile some of the decisions, but you can empathize and you can learn to step even into the title, to step into someone else's shoes and say, I now understand what I just didn't know. And that is an agent of healing on its own, is empathy.
So good.
I felt it was very well balanced as far as bringing in every perspective that you could draw from. And Janine, I love your healthy attitude. There were things that were hard to read in the book from your perspective, but you didn't get defensive and you didn't, try to dismiss it. You faced it. And that's such a healthy place for a parent to be, to say, things weren't perfect and maybe I could have done things differently, but it is what it is. And we're going to move forward. And I love that, because I think when we tend to get defensive or try to correct our kids or tell them, no, it didn't happen that way, or it just makes it so much harder for the kids to emotionally express themselves. Because like you said, Lauren, then you feel like, oh, now I'm hurting them and now I got to shut down. So I love that you're able to express, it was painful. It was hard to read, but I wanted her to publish it. I wanted her to go for it and get it out there. So,
that vulnerability that Brene Brown talks about all the time and how that's really what makes us human. And to be defensive. And one of the things I say to my friends and say to others who are telling me all these stories of drama in their relationships with their kids is, do you want to be right or do you want a relationship?
Exactly.
I love that.
And so, even with very opinionated now, we're all divided politically. We're all divided. And it does affect families. I know it affects families. And the big point that I try to make is, I care more about you than I care about this issue.
Right.
And that's the attitude I have with Lauren. She's an amazing woman in her own right. And I knew from the moment, she was put in my arms that she was going to be an amazing person. I just knew it. And so what the things that she says don't come out flippantly. She's very thoughtful and intentional about her words. She is got a heart as big as all outdoors. And so I know her heart, and I know her heart wasn't to hurt, but to heal.
Yes.
And so it wasn't like I was being so wonderful. I just know my kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Maybe it was a little bit of both, Janine.
Okay.
We'll take some.
You're pretty wonderful yourself.
Okay, I'll take it.
Well, that's so great to just hear some of your empathy for each other and your vulnerability with each other. And we could go about a million different directions as we think about all the things that are packed in this really great read.
Oh, it's so good.
When we connected with Lauren just recently, we realized, the holiday season is upon us, and it might be helpful to just share with our listeners a little bit about the challenges that come specifically around holiday traditions when it comes to blended families.
Yeah.
Families tend to develop traditions over the years, right? Some of them came from previous generations. They just continue throughout the generations. Others simply develop organically over time. We're like, we'll try this one year. And then all of a sudden, next thing we know, we've got a whole new family tradition.
Right.
We've got quite a few of those, right? And often I think right after a divorce or the loss of a parent, there's this effort to maintain a lot of those traditions. But after a time, when one or both parents end up remarrying or recoupling, that can have an impact on the traditions that the kids are used to. And maybe those traditions they can even count on at times, right? So I wonder, maybe if either of you might go first, tell us a little bit about your perspective on this important topic for step couples and why they need to pay attention to this as we head into the holiday season.
Well, I just think that, right after the divorce, nothing was the same. Nothing was the same. And I just thought to myself, how do I move forward? How do I move forward with 4 teenagers in the house?
Yeah.
And mostly I asked them,
Okay.
what do we want to keep? What's important to keep? And what's important to start fresh? And one of the things that even when we were our first family, our first legacy, I call it a legacy family, was that Christmas Eve was a big deal.
Okay.
We opened our presents on Christmas Eve. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
We went to a service. We came home. We looked for Santa. We opened our presents until 2:00 in the morning, and we were, ridiculously tired on Christmas Day.
So that's when it all happened.
Okay.
That's when it all happened. And so that was one of the things that the kids said they really wanted to keep.
Okay.
Sure.
And so I actually talked to my husband and said, this is what I really would like to do. This is my expectation for this family. I don't know what you did with your kids. His kids were grown at that point.
Okay.
And he was so great. He just said, whatever, if that's, and Christmas Day, we'll just figure it out. We'll play it by ear. But Christmas Eve is going to be kind of, this is what we're going to do. And we have maintained that.
Sounds like you went through the divorce. You maintained this Christmas Eve tradition during your single parent years. And then as you and Bruce were getting ready to get married or somewhere in that relationship, you set some expectations and say, around this particular thing, this is what I really want to be able to,
you want to
provide
protect
for my
it.
kids.
This is what I really want to have as our tradition moving forward. Everything else, is negotiable.
Okay.
But this is really where I want to, and I would suggest that anybody who is in that place of dating somebody with a former family and having the blended family prior to the commitment is to have a book of expectations, to really knock it out with a binder and write it down. Because I can tell you that while we were dating and life was good and, and there's a lot of the motivation to love on you, right? You write down the expectations, and we have come back to this book. We have come back to say, because we kind of gotten askance and we kind of fight about things. And I go, no. This was something we talked about.
Here it is in the book.
It's in writing.
It's in writing. Let's go back.
I love that.
And let's outline it, and say, you agreed to this. what's happening? What happened that we're now fighting over this? Because this was the agreement that we had earlier.
Yeah.
And the mom just talked about the Christmas Eve setting. That was sacred. That was really important.
Mm-hmm.
I, to this day, treasure opening presents on Christmas Eve and staying up really late and then just being in pajamas all day Christmas morning.
Yep.
We don't get up early to open presents like a majority of
Sure.
the Western US culture, and that's fine. But that came from our tradition. But what we do on Christmas Eve had room to change, because what's equally as hard from a child's perspective is trying to replicate a sameness in a tradition that is vastly different, with different family people, different family structure, different food on the table. And so where we found some middle ground there was we always celebrate Christmas Eve with the nuclear side of our bio siblings. Step siblings are not allowed to come to Christmas Eve. And it's not because we don't love them and we don't care deep for them, but that was kind of the one sacred space we drew a boundary around, that this is the only place we will ever have our bio sibling identity together. However, we started doing fondue because my stepdad grew up with fondue in his Christmas tradition. Nice. And we'd never had that before. And that became something that was so new and so welcomed and really dressed up and fun. And we got to linger and just, see the bubbling of the meat and the vegetables and all the things on the plate. And it really actually gelled a new identity on Christmas Eve that was still traditional and rooted, but that had some flavor and flair of my stepdad and his tradition. And I actually write about this in the book, but one year, after almost a decade of this tradition, he tried to change it up and get my Italian grandmother to cook lasagna. And we all boycotted Christmas dinner that night. We were so angry. And he thought, well, what's the big deal? We're eating dinner. But he didn't realize that he was uprooting the one blended family tradition that was organic and welcomed with joy. And he was trying to throw in a curveball, and we were not having it because that was a unifying agent in our glue at the time. So in a couple weeks, when we gather on Christmas Eve and drink lots of espresso to stay up till 2 a.m., there will be fondue on our watch.
Awesome.
That's great. I heard a couple of principles, I think, in there, and I wonder if this sounds right to you. One of them is all about figuring out and navigating this way to honor the old while we're introducing the new. And Janine, I love the way that you said, I just asked my kids, hey, what was the most important thing? And we found out to them what was really most important was this Christmas Eve experience that they've had for so long. And so that's one principle. The other principle that I think I heard in there as well is how to really cherish the bio unit. Now, for you, I think I heard in your story a little while ago, Janine, that Bruce's kids were all grown adults
out of the house
when you married, and they were out of the house. And so for your unique story, it made sense to capture some time for you and your 4 teenagers, just for you as a bio unit plus Bruce, it sounds like. For other families, that specific thing may not work, but the principle behind it is, how do we really engage our bio units and love each other well and experience that well? Do those 2 principles sound right to you?
Yeah, I think that there is an attempt in blended families, and I'm going to speak from experience. Oh, we're just all going to love each other, and we're all going to be this one big happy family. Yeah. And I just think that that's not realistic.
Really? You didn't watch the Brady Bunch growing up, Janine?
Yeah, right. That's Hollywood. But the passive aggressive, all those things come out when you try to do that.
Right.
And so I said to Bruce, this is going to be something that we're going to be intentional about, and we're going to love your children in this way. This is how I'm going to love your children. Yeah. But this is how I'm going to love my children. And my children, it's, the way I said is, don't ever make me choose. And I will never make you choose.
Yeah.
Okay. I want time to love on my children without your children being in the mix. And I want you to have time to love on your children without my children being in the mix.
Right.
Yeah. And here's why that's actually a boundary that can create a healthy blend, because the realism in that, to be able to say, there's an almost perfect stranger in my home, engaging in the most intimate of family traditions, in our pajamas, with our robes on, with bad breath and no makeup. And I don't do Christmas morning or Christmas Eve with just anyone. This is my family. This is 15, 20 years of upbringing with this unit. And then so to say, because of a time, date, and place and wedding vows, all of a sudden, this person is now welcome into that intimacy is not real. However, with time and patience and incremental change, just like the incremental change that bonds a tradition in the first place, you actually can integrate the blend in a very holistic and very relevant and meaningful way, as opposed to that bomb dropping and you just feeling like the shrapnel is tearing your heart apart. And I feel like there are sometimes there are these guards up to say, well, man, I'm going to hurt feelings if your bio family goes and watches a Christmas movie and my bio family goes and gets brunch, and then we're leaving each other out. However, that refreshment and that safety to then come back and maybe have the blended lunch after you've had mornings to yourself will actually enhance the blend, because you're all filled up with that safety that's always on edge when you have a new person lurking over your shoulder. And it took me a long time, especially with a stepdad figure as a grown adult woman, to let a new adult male into that intimate space in my interior of my house. And that's not something you really think about, but man, I've got a robe on, and with my dad, he changed my diapers. He saw me. Do all that stuff.
Big deal, right? Yeah.
This guy did not. And therefore I feel like I need to go get dressed and put together before I can even see him for coffee. And that's something that's really unspoken that I don't think really fleshes itself out, so that it's okay to have some separation and autonomy. I think sometimes that actually helps the blend.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things I see and I hear, and we're in the relationship space. So this is what we do for our company.
Right.
But one of the things I hear women, mothers saying to their children, can you just be nice to him? And instead of saying, help me understand what you're feeling.
Yes.
Because fine, it's like, say you're sorry. Well, say you're sorry. That really needs to come from the heart.
Right.
Saying the words don't make it so.
Right.
Yes.
In the way of, what do you mean just be nice to him? I maybe they don't like him. Maybe they feel vulnerable, like Lauren was talking about. We're not attached yet. I don't feel like I can be vulnerable with him. He's not my dad. She's not my mom. Okay. Allow your children to speak their heart to you.
Yes.
And don't tell them how to feel.
Right.
Just allow them to feel.
Right. And that's not to say that we don't set some boundaries around, hey, in this house, we're going to be civil and we're going to, speak kindly to each other and respectful. But that's a lot different to say, hey, can you help me understand what's going on for you? And, as we process that, and by the way, I do expect civility in our home. That's a lot different than like
just
you said earlier.
Be nice.
Hey, can't you just be nice to him?
Yeah.
Two totally different conversations.
Well, I remember my stepdad saying, I love you guys so much because I just love your mom and you're an extension of your mom. And I, forgive me, but I was calling BS on that because, that'd be like throwing a college fraternity party and saying, because I'm dating you, I love your friends because they live in the same dormitory. No, that's not how love works. And I'm giving you permission to love my mom. Go do your thing. Right. But you do not love me yet because you hardly know me. And until you can prove that you're willing to know me outside of my mom, without her in the picture, without her pressuring me to come alongside and welcome you in. I just give me some space, give me some time. And I think he's seen me come around.
For sure.
Yeah. We've recently heard this term intimate strangers. And I heard you bring both those words up when you were describing what it felt like to have a new stepdad there Christmas Eve. And you are intimate strangers. You don't know each other in the beginning, and that takes time. And I think one of the difficulties comes when we recouple and we're excited to move on and start new traditions, and the adults kind of want to leave the past in the past and let's do something new now. And come on, kids, this is going to be great. And usually the kids are in a very different place. And so rushing in to build new traditions right out of the gate, moving too fast can be really uncomfortable because, like you said, you don't even know this person yet. And so how do you include them in that intimate, precious time that you have as a family that you've experienced for years?
It has to be incremental.
It does.
I think you used that word earlier. Like Ron Deal often says, slowing down speeds things up. And I think that's just so true.
Yes.
I tell a story. I haven't actually, this one, I don't think made the pages of In Their Shoes, but I remember it like yesterday, and it was around Christmas time. So because we're talking about Christmas tradition, it was one of the first Christmas Eves that my stepdad was an actual stepdad, that he was not dating my mom anymore. We were part of the wedding, and we were celebrating Christmas Eve at their house. And at the time, my dad and stepmom lived pretty far away, about 4.5 hour drive away. And we had arranged the schedule, as most stepkids do, so that we could spend, Christmas Eve with mom and stepdad, and then have some margin and spend Christmas Day with dad and stepmom. And we were all merrily on our way. And, you guys are in the Pacific Northwest, what snow and rain and ice look like. And it happened to be Christmas time in Colorado, which you can imagine. There sometimes it's a beautiful snow when you're sitting by a fire in your pajamas opening presents. That snow is not so beautiful when it's almost midnight and you're crossing windy, snow-blown, hard visibility stretches of ice in the dark after leaving a really warm, cozy fire with mom and stepdad to go and do part 2. And I'll never forget it. We were in an old Jeep Cherokee with probably a broken heater. And it was one of my brothers was driving, and he was white knuckling it. And I feel safe with my brothers. They're great drivers. And we were all feeling really vulnerable for our safety. We were cold. We had never been to this house before because my dad and stepmom had recently moved. And we were verbalizing our anger in that car. Just how unfair is this, that it's Christmas Eve and mom and Bruce get to be sitting by a fire saying, probably talking about how we treated them. And, how did we do this? Did we do this? Okay. How was the food? Okay. I'm sure they're just decompressing about everything that happened with this new blended family. And here we are white knuckling it. And when we get to the other side, we're going to have a whole new family dynamic, new expectations. Are we going to be polite enough to our stepmom? Are we going to have enough energy? Are we going to be gracious enough when we open the presents? Are we and the emotional drain that I felt in the physical and emotional space on that journey, that 4-hour trek across the snow, was definitely not from the song, to grandmother's house we go. No. It was more of
was no one-horse open sleigh.
No, there was no sleigh. Santa and his reindeers were very far away. And I don't think either parent in that episode of memory would have even had the data to know to say, thank you for what you did to get here. Thank you for sacrifice. Thanks for paying for your own gas. I mean, it's that level of nuance that never makes it to the dinner table. What we end up hearing is how ungracious we were, or how grumpy we are, or how tired we look, and it just, enough is enough after a certain amount of time. And the expectations to just divide your life and do things perfectly twice is not helpful.
Yeah. I'm just exhausted listening to you describe that scene. I mean, that's exhausting.
I think my brother got a new car the next year.
I hope so.
It was a very
Probably.
sketchy stretch of road.
Probably.
Oh.
I think whether you're, driving across a frozen tundra for 4 hours, or whether you're, driving 5 blocks to get to that transition point between homes, as a kid, sometimes we're just white knuckling it emotionally.
Yeah.
Trying to make that transition. And I think it's hard, as parents, we want to receive the kids, and we're so glad that they're home, and we're excited
to see them.
that it's our time to have them. And yet having some grace and space to be able to let them, release the wheel a little bit, let the blood flow get back to the fingers, and we're not quite white knuckling it anymore. Those transitions are hard, and we need to recognize that. And, for most blended families with kids moving back and forth, there's a transition of some kind around the holidays. Yeah. And it's something that we really need to pay attention to. So how can we let, our kids decompress a little bit and have the security in ourselves as parents to be able to hear the discomfort that they're experiencing so that they can maybe decompress a little bit more effectively?
Yeah.
I don't know. What thoughts do you have around that?
Well, one of the things that in child development that I do a lot of work in child development and human capital development. And one of the things I really think that we suggest in children moving back and forth, I think that the parents should move back and forth in the different houses and the children to stay put.
Yeah.
Because the adults are the adults.
Sure.
And what we know from the research is that children need consistency, predictability, calm. They don't need chaos. And when you divorce, and then that's one set of chaos. And then you add another family, there you go again with another set of chaos. And I truly believe that children's, even their development suffers.
Yeah.
And if they're adolescents, you get that anger pushback from the adolescents. If they're little ones, they don't know how they're feeling, so they go to their room, or they withdraw. I just feel like parents are the adults. They should move the houses so the kids can stay in one house.
We actually had a family
that
friend,
did that
right after their divorce for, I don't know, maybe a couple of years. The parents would
rotate to
the
the house,
stayed home,
and the child stayed in one home.
Good for them.
Yeah,
I think there's a term for it. I think it's called nesting. I've heard that out there. I don't know if that's official or not, but
that might work in the initial transition. But moving another spouse in the mix is probably
and it did bring up other issues too, as I recall.
I love that commitment. I would say though, there's, for me, the most practical advice that I would maybe offer, not as an expert or somebody who says it must be this way, but I think that some of the exhaustion and the back and forth is truly in the limited margins of the actual day, place, time. And, we all have watched the Four Christmases movie that's comical, and who doesn't love Reese Witherspoon and all the fun. The dynamics play out pretty exaggerated, but some of them are spot on. And I think if you can just potentially let a kid have their rest and their place, and maybe you actually deem a different day, Christmas, on the calendar, and you don't try and do it all within that 48-hour span of time, because I literally see, and I was the child who, you've got 4 hours here and 2 hours there, and then a commute, and then this. And by the time you've gotten through your restful, magical holidays, even as a child who has boundless energy, you're just poured out. And that increases the stress when you try and go back, and it increases. And so just what could we do to linger by the fire a little bit more? Maybe we're with mom and stepdad every other year for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And then on the 27th, after a gap day through the 29th, we replicate a Christmas tradition at the other house. We work with a lot of groups that have limited setting exposure that aren't even blended families, that are medical doctors or emergency responders. And they're trying to establish these traditions for their families that aren't even blended. but they are on call for these big holidays, and they have to. And one of the coping mechanisms is actually choosing a different physical day.
Right.
And so as much as that's hard to let go of that grip of control and say, but this is my Christmas and it's on the calendar, they still play Christmas music on the 27th, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I believe that might create a little bit more respite for the back and forth stress of fitting it within a timeline.
Yeah, that's really good. And, however that plays out practically, I think in general, what I'm hearing is, how can we create a moment or a space for the kids to just kind of decompress and actually get that rest and allow it to be magical? Things are magical when they just kind of unfold and they don't just happen so quickly, and they're not forced, and we're on an agenda, and you got to get to the other house, we better hurry up. That's not quite so magical. Right? But as it unfolds over a reasonable amount of time, we're creating some great memories there, which ultimately begins to build some of those bonds that we can create as a family. So whether it's the 25th or the 27th, are we really after hitting the day, or are we really after building those connections and those shared memories together in a lower tension environment?
Anything you can do to release the pressure.
For sure.
And open up for more enjoyment.
Right. There's a story that it's not about Christmas so much, but it does really reflect giving your child permission to love the step parent. Because and I'll give you a story. I was driving my youngest daughter, was taking her to school, and she had all this stuff in her backpack, all this Claire's feather pens and and I looked at her and said, "Where did you get all that?" And she kind of held it to her chest like she was ashamed. And I said, "Are you shoplifting? I mean, I didn't give you the money to get all that."
Yeah.
She said, "Mom, I got it from my stepmom." And I saw her face, and she was really red and she was really upset. And I pulled over to the side of the road just to focus on her. And I said, "You know what I'm going to do? You don't ever have to be ashamed of getting stuff from your stepmom. You're so lucky. You have so many people that love you, including your stepmom. And I give you permission to love her."
Good for you.
I love that.
That's wonderful.
Because she's not going to replace me. Nobody's going to replace me.
Yeah.
Right. Have that confidence that nobody can be your mom. Right. Your mom is your mom.
Yeah.
Right.
The confidence and the security.
Yeah.
And the security. Right. So I saw her calm down. And when she would talk about her stepmom, I would never get angry. I would always welcome more information because it really helped her. I gave her permission to love her.
Perfect. And what a great opportunity as kids are going back and forth this holiday season to just encourage them to have fun with that other family, to enjoy their time. And when we can free them to do that, it frees them from the binds that they get into around love between mom and stepmom, dad and stepdad, and these two confusing places that I just want to be me. You've freed your daughter up in that moment to really allow her to escape that bind
and release that responsibility, like Lauren was talking about earlier, of wanting to protect her parents and not hurt them. So I'm going to be quiet and not say anything.
Yeah.
When you're honoring that other home and allowing the child to enjoy both parents in the other home, you're releasing them from that burden of having to protect you or make sure you're okay.
Absolutely.
So that's a great point.
What a great story.
And I thought of something in this transition question about kind of the reverse order of agenda. Typically in our human experience, when you have a really fun holiday, it starts with a meal, and then you open presents, and then you do the gingerbread houses, and then you kind of slowly unwind and get in your pajamas and watch a movie and do the cocoa and then tuck into bed. And I just thought about, even as adults, if you're like me, not everybody's a coffee drinker, but sometimes all you need is that tradition of just a hot cup of coffee with something to read in your robe before you start the shower, before you do your hair, before you get into your routine. And what if in the handoff for these Christmas pass-offs for Christmas Eve to Christmas morning or Christmas Day to Christmas night or whatever the next day. What if you reverse engineered that cool down time with the pajamas and the cocoa and the Christmas movie? And that was the very first thing that welcomed the kids to the new house. And then you didn't go straight into we're going to eat breakfast and we're going to throw on we have to open all our presents and we're going to do the Christmas craft and make the ornaments. So what if you started with, hey, welcome. I have a cup of hot cocoa and you guys can stay in your pajamas and we're going to actually just go and watch The Grinch. And it's 90 minutes and we don't have to talk to each other and we're just going to laugh. It's going to be background. And then when the movie's over, we can start our Christmas agenda and just almost reverse engineer that downtime in the beginning as opposed to getting there toward the end.
Yeah. That's a great idea.
Love that.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. I love that idea. I think another great tip for parents is when you do pick up your kids after they've spent time in the other home, let's say they're over there first and then they come to your home, is kind of assess where they're at emotionally and give them an opportunity to process if they need to. Yeah. I remember when our daughter, when she was younger, she would be at her dad's, doing all of the hoopla. And then she'd come to our house and she would be really quiet and disappointed. And it was because she was having a great time at her dad's. Yeah. She had opened some great presents and she wanted to play with them and she was having fun with her siblings over there. And then she was just yanked out of that environment. And even though she was excited about coming and being with us, she had all these mixed emotions because she was also missing them. And so I learned that when she would come, especially on holidays, I would ask, how were things over at your dad's? Tell me about what what was your favorite present? What are you looking forward to playing with when you go back over there tomorrow? And just let her process. And if she needed to be sad or upset or disappointed, let her express that. Let your kids talk about what they're feeling because there can be so many mixed emotions going on. You described as an adult, Lauren, all of the mixed emotions you had. And it doesn't matter how old kids are.
Yeah, we gotta give space for that. I think is what I'm hearing,
and not be offended and hurt by it. I could have been like, "Well, great, our Christmas is ruined because you're in a bad mood." But we can get really self-focused as parents. I can,
we sure can. Yeah.
But really expecting it. Yeah. And having some empathy that, there might be some things that come up and that's okay. And then applying what you were just talking about, Lauren, that reverse, start out slow. I love that idea.
I love it too. And, I would encourage people to try it. You might be listening today and going, I think I'm going to give that a try. You know what? I bet you'll find. I bet, that we're going to watch The Grinch. It's 90 minutes. Here's everybody's cocoa. I bet you get about 15 or 20 minutes in and one of the kids is going to be like,
I wonder what's in that present.
When are we going to open the presents, right? And before you know it, people are, everybody's going to start getting engaged and
maybe let them set the pace of how fast things move along. That would be a great idea. I love that, Lauren.
Love that. Thanks for sharing that.
We'll see if it works. Just give us a feedback loop because it was
there you go. That's right.
Totally spontaneous idea. I just had a vision of what that could look like as an opportunity. A lot of things are trial and error, and sometimes something works for one dynamic and it totally flops with another. So I think just being open to opportunity and releasing some of that duplication expectation. You were talking, Kim, about even downloading what happened at Dad's house, and that's really good for emotional process. It can also backfire in a way where I don't want to tell you what happened at Dad's house. I already told him what I was going to do over here. And
I'm tired of talking.
I'm tired of talking. And I don't, it's exhausting for so many reasons to try and duplicate yourself. And I think one of the things that comes over time that frees step parents, and bio parents, I'm not a step parent or bio parent myself from a blended family in my nuclear design, but I am a child of that legacy. And I will say that sometimes surrendering your right to know the whole story is what happens as a result of divorce. And I wish we could just say, but it's my child and I know everything about them and I know all the things. It's just simply not true when they cannot puppeteer or videotape the authenticity of what they've experienced on the other side, you lose insight into that. You don't have a Ring doorbell following them around. And if you do, that's another podcast issue of stalking.
Yes, definitely.
But the idea of, I need to let go of a part of my child that I don't get visibility into, which I can only imagine the grief of that. But maybe even without a blend, when you launch a child to college, which I haven't had to do yet, there's a huge part of their life that you no longer are seeing. And eventually you have to trust that they're living the path that was placed for them. And it's not their fault. Yes. They're not showing you 360 degrees of their pursuit.
Absolutely. And I love that you just said that at the end there, Lauren, because I think even those of us that have experienced nuclear family, there's a false sense of belief that we do know everything that's going on in our kid's life. But I mean, even at a very young age, you don't know exactly what's being talked about out on the playground at recess for those 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? There are these little pockets of time, even at the youngest age. And then your thought process in launching kids to college. We just launched one to college in September. And we're realizing just how much of her life we don't know right now. We're going, oh, yeah, this is kind of a normal piece of life.
Yeah.
And so absolutely being able to just release that and relinquish it and trust that you're going to know the things that are the most important and be able to respond to them with empathy, like we talked about earlier, and love and grace and acceptance. Gosh, you're not going to get everything you want.
No.
But you can really make sure that the needs of the relationship are met and you can thrive in the midst of that. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Wow, this has really been a great discussion.
Yes.
Thank you both so much for being a part of it. I wonder if we could, Janine, I wonder if you could just give one encouragement here at the end or recommendation as everybody marches toward the Christmas holiday. What might it be?
Well, I think one of the things that has been really a helpful formula for my family and my relationship with my husband is to sit down before the holidays, before the big, couple of days. Okay, like Lauren said, it's those 2 days that are so packed.
Yep.
What are your expectations here? What are your expectations? And then for me to do the same, right? It's in the book. That's what it talks about, is writing down what your expectations are and then having a discussion. Are they realistic? Is there something that, this is how I'm going to handle this? Because I think that really comes, everybody gets to say what they want. Yeah. Right. And then you get to adapt it to what is realistic.
Absolutely. That's so good. Now, if you're listening to this on the day that it releases, it is the 14th of December. So you only got like 10 days. You better get that conversation
going. The book out. Yeah.
That's right. Get the book out.
Yeah.
Lauren, what's one encouragement or recommendation you might make as we close up?
I would say sometimes when it comes to the holidays, especially, the vision in your dream is best left minimized a bit, and leaving some space and margin in your heart to actually embrace and receive those little glimmers of true dreams that are microcosms of goodness that sometimes get just eclipsed by all of what you thought was not. And so I think I'm rarely somebody who says lower the bar.
Yeah.
But in this case, turn off the Hallmark movie, get in touch with the trauma and the experience of loss and pain that is for so many of us, even without divorce around the holidays, just because of the high pressure to be in a snow globe, and take the joy and fight for joy with incremental wins, and don't try and get the whole gingerbread house in one bite, but maybe have a little gumdrop here and there, and you will have a much tastier treat.
And savor the gumdrop.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Sounds like, I love what you're saying there, letting letting that kind of the dream experience emerge over time and not trying to orchestrate it or force it to fit a mold or fit what you think it should be.
Which means we're going to have to let go of some agendas.
Absolutely.
And that's hard.
I love it.
But it is doable. Yeah.
Such great encouragement and wisdom. We're very grateful. Now, before we wrap up, we wanted to ask you, you recently co-authored a new book that just came out
together
called Relationship Essentials. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'd love to. It's been really fun. We launched it back in November and had an opportunity. I had a second book opportunity come to my feet, and it was the publishing company was asking for some sort of relationship practicality and said, do you know anything about that? I said, well, it's only what we do full time is take concepts that are theoretical and make them a tangible framework. And I had immediately hung up the phone with that call and called my mom here and said, I don't feel like it would be integrous or fun for me to write about this subject without your voice. Would you like to do a piece together? And we kind of drummed up a outline of some of the tools that we teach regularly in our curricula at the Center for Relationship Education. And then we were able to put that personal touch and flair in. We actually created practical physical power tools. So we have things like a hammer and a level and a wrench, and all of it is because if you're thinking of the tools that actually fix things around your house, we wanted to apply that. How do you maintain and build healthy foundational connections? And what a better analogy than a toolbox. And so it really is a practical 10 tools, almost checklist of how to engage relational wellness with all people in your life, romantic partner, coworkers, parent, child, friends, and total strangers. And it has been a humbling and fun book launch, and we're excited to share it with the world.
That's awesome. Janine, you a couple of years ago watched Lauren go through this process of publishing, and now you've gotten to walk through a process of publishing along with her.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
Well, I mean, I feel like my buttons are popping all the time because I'm so proud of her. And she took the lead on this, and she just kind of told me what to do. And I just did my homework,
And
so
you had a little role reversal. She was telling you what to do, and you had to do your homework.
Right. She's really very organized, and, she knows how to get things launched. And so I just followed her lead and followed her timeline and wrote the stories that she wanted me to tell. And then of course I had some ideas for the book, and I just feel like the tools, the whole tool concept, we used to do these DIY conferences for married couples, do it yourself married couple. Sure. And we use tools, the same kind of the bucket of like Tool Time Tim, for home improvement. And because of the tools, the men really were involved. And how do you get men really turned on to using these tools for healthy? Women read all these relationship books, but we wanted to have a book that was universal.
Yes.
And so that anybody could, who doesn't matter your gender, would pick it up and say, I can do this. This is something I can do.
I love it. That's so great.
And I love the subtitle, Feel Heard, Fight Fair, and Set Boundaries in All Areas of Life. I love that. We're so excited to read this book, and we're hoping to have you guys back on at some time in the future to talk about some of these concepts. It's awesome.
That's great.
We would love to come back. Thank you for having us.
Oh, yeah.
That would be wonderful. So I'm guessing that we can find these, our listeners can find In Their Shoes or Relationship Essentials anywhere books are sold. Is that right?
Yes, they're both on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the different booksellers, Walmart, Target, everywhere that there's a bookseller, you can find it.
Yeah. And we'll go ahead and put links in the show notes to those as well. So
absolutely,
make it easy.
Definitely. Well, Janine, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. I'm positive it's going to bring value to our listeners. We hope that you have a really Merry Christmas.
Yes.
And a wonderful New Year as well.
Yes. Thanks.
You the same to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Take care. What a privilege talking to Lauren and Janine.
Yes, they're amazing.
They are. And, they're just so genuine in being able to share their story, even the tough stuff.
Yeah, we love their vulnerability.
For sure. Hey, if you're interested in checking out either of their books, which we highly recommend, and we haven't even read the second one yet, but, we put a link in the show notes to both books. So please go check that out.
Yeah, we also put a link in the show notes to episode 40, where we did an actual book review on Lauren's book, In Their Shoes, if you want to go back and listen to our insights around the book.
Sure. Go check that out. And, along the way in the conversation today, we talked a bit about empathy.
Speaking of in their shoes.
That's right. And next week, we're going to do a deep dive into empathy. Is that right?
We are.
Okay. Yep. So tune in next week. You do not want to miss it. But that's going to make today's episode a wrap.
Thanks again, Lauren and Janine. Until next time.